Hello, my friends, Stevie B here. Welcome back to the channel. So over the last few months, one of the publishers that I've been working with has been asking me for a steady stream of rock cues. And honestly, I've been pretty stoked about it. Rock tracks are super fun to write. They're relatively simple, and since guitar is my main instrument, I feel totally comfortable in this genre. In today's video, I want to talk you through how I approach writing and mixing these types of tracks. We'll take a listen to one of the cues that I just completed, and I'll also share some of my favorite virtual instruments and plugins that help bring these cues to life. Also, if you're part of the Production Music Academy, you'll know that we recently wrapped up our Indie Rock Challenge, so stick around until the end of this video because I'll be featuring some killer submissions from our members and offering a bit of feedback as well. I usually start writing these tracks off with the drums. They set the foundation for the energy. I'm a big fan of addictive drums. I especially like the Fairfax kit. I think it sounds great for rock tracks. I think a lot of the addictive drums presets on their own are super convincing, but I'll generally take it a step further and blend in additional samples, mainly for kick and snare. It just helps give the drums a bit more punch and weight. In this track, I've got a kick sample. This would probably be something I grabbed from Splice. I've got my Circles Dead 1975 kit, and these are samples that I've just loaded into a blank contact instrument, which sound like this on their own. Super tight, intimate kit. We've got some drum fills, and then bringing in the Fairfax kit and the kick sample. One thing I really appreciate about addictive drums, aside from how it sounds, is that they have all these built-in MIDI loops, and there's some expansion kits which I bought too, which I find really useful. They're not quantized beats, they're actual performances. So they have a really natural feel to them. You get those subtle timing shifts and velocity variations that, make it sound more like a real drummer. That authenticity is just so important. Aside from the actual drum sound itself, I think that's the key to, making it sound realistic. So I'll often drag and drop these performances into the track rather than perform them on my MIDI keyboard. One thing I really try to avoid is overly repetitive loops. Every 4-8 bars, I'm going to sneak in some fills, some cymbal accents, just to keep things moving and, feeling human. The beat itself here is super simple, but we're infusing some detail here at the end of every 4 bars to help it along. So it's not like I have or need a lot of drum layers in this track, but never underestimate the power of percussion. I've got claps layered in here and tambourines, and they just add so much more dimension to it. Same idea with the drums in this track. By the way, you're going to see me switch between Logic and Cubase here. The Logic track is a fairly old session. It's before I switched to Cubase. The drums in this track are pretty much the same idea, using the Fairfax kit, kick and snare from Circles Dead 1975, some claps, a reinforcement kick sample. And I'm running these drums through the Knock plugin, something that I picked up a couple months ago. Pretty cool. You see it getting used on a lot of hip hop beats and stuff, but I think it actually works well on rock drums. Running Volv compressor in parallel as well on this drum bus, just adding a bit more compression to it. The Levelor plugin from Safari, which is adding some extra grit to it. And I got to give Safari Pedals a shout out. They've actually sent me a few of their plugins, and they're all really cool. I definitely got to do a proper review video for them. When it comes to bass, I tend to bounce around between using virtual instruments and recording real bass. For rock stuff, I have a couple of go-to VSTs that do the job pretty well. In this track, I'm using Icon Bass, which doesn't always work for rock tracks. For this tune, I thought it fit nicely. I'm using Neutron 4 on this bass, and the exciter and transient shaper help it to sound a little more edgy. The bass for this track, it's something that I recorded with my Squier P-Bass. And in this case, I needed a lot of extra grit. Not only am I putting this bass through the Tube plugin by Goodhertz, adding a bit of warmth and saturation to it, but also using the Levelor from Safari and the Bull Sub Machine, also a Safari pedal, which is adding a bit of extra sub bass to it. Without any processing, and with the processing, makes quite a difference. Guitars are obviously the centerpiece in any rock track, and the key for me is just strategic layering. I'll often take a chord progression and record it in multiple voicings or, different registers. I'll take advantage of the stereo field as much as I can. I'll record one take for the left, one take for the right, and I'll often blend real guitars with virtual instruments too. Depending on the track, I'll either lean on one or the other. In this track here, there's 6 layers. I started off with this centered rhythmic layer. Not super distorted either. It's important to note, just slightly overdriven. This isn't a hard rock track. It's got more of an indie vibe. I got a left and right take, and I'm playing these in a different register on the guitar. Some reinforcement guitars here on the bottom. Same kind of idea. All together. And there's a lead track, which is sort of the top line here. Depending on the style of track, I'll sometimes get very surgical with editing. I know some of you are thinking probably like, why not just use audio quantize? And it's not always reliable. Audio quantize works great if you have like a really simple part, but I find that you sometimes have to get in there and do those manual cuts if you really want to fine tune it. This is obviously a little bit more tedious, but I've been doing this so long that, the time it takes me to, cut this up and do the nudging, it's actually not that bad. You get pretty quick at it. And it's satisfying because, things sound super tight. That being said, tightness isn't always a good thing. Sometimes things sound better when they're loose. It really just kind of depends on the style of track that you're working on. I took a slightly different approach when writing guitars for this track. I actually leaned on the Apex trailer guitar to write the riff, which on its own sounds like this. And on its own, it almost sounds a bit ridiculous, but with the recorded guitars, it kind of makes sense. So adding in these rhythm guitars. With the bass and drums. Not really going to get into vocals in this video, but this track in particular is kind of fun because it did have a vocal element to it. So this track is kind of a good example of like a blend of virtual guitars and real guitars. Not only do we have the Apex trailer guitar riff, but I'm also using Voyager guitar from Teletone. Awesome plugin. And I'm even using a serum patch here, which is like a guitar patch. And it sounds pretty weird. Like on their own, they sound a little strange. But that almost like synth-like quality kind of blends well with everything else in the track. As for synths, honestly, I don't really have like a go-to rock synth or anything. I try to basically just make sure that whatever patch I choose, doesn't clash with the guitars too much. I'm using a Logic patch here, and it's just kind of lifting everything up here in this last little bit. Putting that through some decapitator, saturating it a bit. And it's not super loud in this mix, but it kind of lives in its own lane. Doesn't interfere with the guitars too much. Almost kind of has like 80s vibe to it. Maybe there's a bit of vintage appeal there. And then finally, I want to talk about transitions, which are important in all production music. Transitions are going to help keep the track flowing and, prevent it from feeling like a loop on repeat. In this track, there's a number of different risers being used. We've got a couple of cymbal swells and some risers here. So coming into this last little chorus, and then some risers leading us to the very end. Same idea in this track, taking us from the intro into the first A section. Just one simple tonal reverse transition makes a huge difference. All right, so track feedback time. We got a couple tracks to listen to from members of the Production Music Academy who participated in this month's Indie Rock Challenge. First track we're going to listen to here is called Ova Nova by James Barrow. James, thank you so much for submitting this track. We're going to take a listen here, and I'm just going to share my thoughts as I go. Nice. Great riff right off the top. I like that. The intro is maybe perhaps a little bit too long for like a licensing track. It doesn't feel like it drags out too much, but you could probably get away with cutting that in half and just getting right into it. But we're off to a great start here. Sounds awesome. What's really impressive here is that James mentioned that he's using Ableton's built-in instruments. I believe there is some guitar in this track that was added later by his son, he mentioned, but this is sounding really great so far just for Ableton stock libraries. Awesome. There's the guitar. Really cool transition there, man. That's awesome. And we could hear that guitar doing like a call and response thing with the riff. Awesome. Everything sounds good. Mix is balanced. Nothing standing out too much. Let me listen to this transition again. Nice. The toms feel like a little buried in the mix somehow. Maybe also like a bit too mono. It'd be cool to have like a bit of a stereo spread on those toms. As cool as this breakdown is, I actually really like this breakdown. I feel like halfway through, there's maybe some room to add some textures in like the higher range or like a counter melody or something. It's quite open. There's definitely some space left to explore and maybe like differentiate the back half of this breakdown with the front half. Just a thought. So this part is really interesting. We've got our core riff, the guitar riff happening, but you're developing the bass line here. And those two riffs play off each other really nicely. And I think that adds a lot of contrast between, this last A section and the first A section, which is basically just the riff. So really, really well done there. Nice ending. Yeah, really great stuff here, James. One thing I noticed is that the snare seems like a bit more subdued in the first A section than it does in this final section or even the breakdown. It's probably just a volume automation thing. I think you could probably afford to turn the snare up in this initial A section. Compare that to... I like that drum presence, like where it's at in the mix right there feels good to me. So hopefully that feedback is helpful. Thanks again for submitting, James. Awesome stuff. Okay, we've got another track to check out here from John Chapman. John mentioned that in this track he's using Addictive Drums, the indie kit, real guitar, real bass, and the Arturia B3 organ. Let's check it out. It's called Burning Up. Excellent intro. I love that. Especially this fill here. Really, really cool. Ba, 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 ba. I love how short-lived this little section is because it's just like a little tease. Like I'm dying to hear it again. Nice wide guitars in the mix, really nice balance between the bass and the guitars. Cool. So filling out the rhythm here in this A section, still going back to that 2-chord riff. Really, really cool. I really like how we're switching gears here into this B section with a new riff and also keeping things simple, like not overcomplicating it. Definitely feels licensable. Yeah, big props, John. This is great. I love the buildup of energy. The guitar parts are great, and you're building a ton of anticipation leading into this second A section here. We're going to hear that again. It's awesome. Awesome ending. Both you and James nailed your endings. That was great. Also note the organ here, adding that like extra little ethereal texture, kind of lifts everything up for this last A section. Fantastic work. Really happy to share this on this video. And yeah, thanks so much for submitting this. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you found that helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps to grow this channel and helps me to keep creating videos like this. And if you want to go deeper into the world of production music, head over to productionmusicacademy.com. We've got a growing library of in-depth courses across a wide variety of genres, everything from the Trailer Music Trilogy course to the Pop Music Masterclass, Cinematic Folk, and much more. Monthly and annual members get instant access to all of our premium courses and other benefits. Until the next time, guys, happy composing. See you soon.